I know what my rooted issues are. And it stems back to, when I was 4 years old, my father takes my hand, and he puts it over an open flame of a gas stove, right? And he burns the crap out of it, right? And I end up getting plastic surgery and all this on my right hand or whatever. So that's a rooted thing that's always going to stick with me. So that is a negative attribute that is part of my resiliency line. Yeah. And sometimes it surfaces, but it doesn't surface all the time because I try to understand it, through the avenues of marriage and family and study and so forth, but just like me and just like our listeners, there's a root that's always going to be there.
There's nothing either one of us can do about that. But what we can do something about is where you go from here.
Okay.
And therapy started to change from a problems-oriented focus to a solutions-oriented focus.
I went from 90 and I think I'm at 55 right now.
I think you're about 88, Joe. I think you're about 88.
You're probably right. I'm probably about 88 or so.
So let's say you're carrying that in your head now. I'm going to work and I'm going to pick up the groceries and I'm going to pick up the kid from school and I'm going to do all that stuff. But my secret agenda here, the mission that I'm on personally is I'm going to stay cool through the day.
I became institutionalized over my years of leadership and all that because I believed in being a Marine. I believed in the love for our country and all that. Not that I don't now, but I do resent drinking the Jim Jones Kool-Aid to a certain extent. I do because it affected my family. It affected my well-being, and I wasn't taking care of my well-being.
That's a very good question. Thank you for
sharing.
Powerful
question. It's a powerful.
Very. What's your response to that, Joe?
Well, I don't know this individual, but
right, he's not alone. Let's put it.
No, you're definitely not alone. Trust me, you're normal. You are quite normal. Trust me.
So welcome everybody who's with us this morning, and I'm pleased to be here with Sergeant Major retired Joseph VanFonda, 27-year Marine veteran, combat veteran, multiply decorated, who retired from the Marines and has devoted much of the rest of his life to helping veterans succeed in civilian life and meet the many challenges that they face, and was kind enough to work with me and helping to develop Mission Possible as a toolbox for veterans and first responders to help them deal with the stresses. We've all got stress in life. You don't have to be a veteran or first responder to have stresses, but there's particular stresses that I think vets and first responders are even more vulnerable to, that we want to help you manage. Joe's philosophy is that all life challenges can be managed, and that's why we're here. How you doing this morning, Joe?
I'm doing fine, Dr. Marty Rossman. Thanks for having me again. It's always fun. I think it's intriguing and fun having conversations with you in general because, first of all, number one, I like to pick on you. I like to get your feathers ruffled, and then of course I like to learn more about the mindfulness. And every time I have a conversation with you, I always learn more. I'm excited about today. We're going to talk about challenges that we deal on a daily basis, and setting goals to work through some of those challenges. So I'll pass it back over to you, my friend.
Yeah, so one of the things we talked about, part of the goal of our monthly meetings here is to take some aspect of dealing with these challenges, look at how the toolbox that we've provided, because the Mission Possible course is basically a toolbox of mind, body skills, mind, body, spirit skills. The mind, body, spirit connection is inherent in our being. That's what we're given, but we don't have much education, frankly, in how to use it. Much of our lives is spent trying to do what we think other people expect of us, and trying to do what certainly in the military, doing our duty, following orders, doing what people tell us to do. And Joe and I were talking yesterday, and he was talking about the situation when people get out of the military and they've spent whatever time they've spent, and especially if they've been combat deployed, but even if you haven't been combat deployed, there's a very high level of vigilance. There's a lot expected of you. You're given orders, you're given missions, you're supervised. There are many people watching what you do. You're held accountable for what you do. This isn't always true in civilian life, especially in the entrepreneurial age and where everybody's in it on their own. It's kind of much more free form, and there are stresses involved with that too. But when you get out of a high vigilance situation, Joe told me that it's very common that people's minds are going 90 miles an hour. And again, you're operating at a high level of vigilance and a high level of stress. And then you get out and you don't have that anymore. And you may or may not have a self-driven motivation or goal or know what you're going to do. And there's a lot more free time, and there's a lot of sayings about, free time or idle mind being the devil's workshop. And I'm not a believer in the devil per se, but that's when our worries come up, our fears come up, our self-doubts come up, our inner critic comes up. Am I doing what I need to be doing? You're reintegrating, or maybe trying to reintegrate with a family that hasn't shared your experiences, and you may have had experiences that you don't want to talk about, and doesn't seem appropriate to share or talk about. You don't have your buddies around who have shared those experiences. So those are some particular stresses that are kind of different than the average civilian has. And am I getting that right, Joe?
No, Marty, you're spot on. I mean, when you transition out of the military, or you leave the police force or sheriff's department, or whatever, you're in a structured environment, right? There's the mindset of instant obedience to orders. In other words, you're going to do that daily task, and you're going to give your best, and your mind is set for this no defect mentality. Right, that's the way we are. Because let it be a police officer, sheriff, first responder, even a military individual. You have to be your best, and you're that machine. Seriously, you have to accomplish that task and that routine. Let it be your first responder protecting communities and so forth. So you have to be at that level. So military individuals are trained to be at that level. And then when they finally transition out of the military, like you said, they're at that high level of movement, and that mind just slows down. So that mantra, sadly, in the military and so forth, complacency kills, because you're no longer, running a 90-mile-an-hour race. You slow down to 30, and you're wondering, wow, I'm stepping on the gas here, and I'm speeding in an environment where I don't need to speed anymore.
Right.
So you're learning to adjust to structure. And in the Marine Corps, we're in a different era of how we think. We do more by 9 o'clock than most individuals do by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which is true. And that's what you're trained. So when you leave the military and you're trying to rekindle the quality time with your family, or you're getting a new job, or you're absorbing the slow 35-mile-an-hour pace that you're not accustomed to, then you take this new job on, and you're working to get the job done. Others just work until that time, and they're out, and you're sitting, my inbox is still full. I want to do this. So things are different, so the transition from that 90 to 35, it doesn't happen overnight, Marty. It really doesn't.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've been out for a little while right now, and honestly, I went from 90, and I think I'm at 55 right now.
I think you're about 88, Joe. I think you're about
Exactly.
88.
Yeah. You're probably right. I'm probably about 88 or so. Absolutely. And you run like peanut butter uphill, Marty. You're nice and
I'm
slow
like
and
I'm
easy.
like 12. I'm like 12.
But but exactly. So, and here's the thing though. So if I transition down and have to start this new chapter in my life, anxiety is there. It's happening right now. It's happening.
Yeah, so we're trying, and the thing is, when you get out, there's no similar. Am I wrong that you were a drill sergeant, a training sergeant?
Yeah, I was a drill instructor from
You're a drill instructor.
93, a
Yeah.
drill instructor 93 to 96 at Paris Island. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful thing, by the way. And was a very nice drill instructor. I used to put candy under the pillows of the recruits and so forth. And
I'm sure.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. I was their definitely I was their caretaker. So
Yeah.
uh,
And the point is, when people get out, there's no such training. There's not an intensive, thought out, structured way to turn you into a Marine. There is to turn you into a Marine, or to turn you into
exactly.
to turn you into a sailor or an aviator, whatever. But there's no such thing on the way out that I'm aware of.
No,
And
not at all. I mean,
and
the
what
military, they have transitional services called TAP, and 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or whatever the case is, and they talk about what resources are available for you. You create somewhat of a resume. What's your strengths and weaknesses. What's happening in the veteran community. And they try to transition you within that time. So they're trying to pack 85 pounds of civilian dialogue and platform into a 35-pound pack that you've been carrying for a very, very long time. So that pack is a
Mm,
lot heavy on transitioning out. And then again, you have units. Sometimes your units don't give you that time because they're selfish. And and I was never that way as a sergeant major. I made sure that my staff NCOs as well as non-commissioned officers always had the available time and even more so they can transition out because it's their well-being. They served our country, and
mm.
they have a family, a package to create that transition with and provide and do great things out there in the world. So 2 weeks isn't enough, and it doesn't. And here's the thing, though, they don't talk about mental health. They don't talk about the stresses, anxiety, all those things that's going with it. What you're up against, and
Mhm.
when I was fortunate enough to sit in some resiliency tank. You know, you know, you want to call it unions, or if you want to call it just thought process tank, just to where is the break in terms of resiliency with our service members?
Mhm.
What's the resiliency line? And why are they committing suicide at a high level? After training, during training, or why is mental health a big issue right now within the military?
Yeah,
It's always been an issue. That's the thing, though.
absolutely.
Always
Well,
been an
it's
issue.
just coming out of, for most of my life, even in medicine, I mean, mental health is the sort of poor child of medicine. It tends to be, even though there's a lot of resources and more growing now, it's really just starting to happen. I mean, when I was even in medical school, you just handled it very carefully. You didn't talk about it too much. I mean,
Mhm.
the frankly mentally ill people with psychosis or schizophrenia, or that at that time were hospitalized. Now it's very hard to get hospitalized. Um, but the day-to-day effects of stress, I mean, stress is the major risk factor for every
Health
uh,
issue, yeah.
major medical disease, from heart disease to cancer to Alzheimer's disease to chronic lung disease, to all the diseases that come from the kind of things that we do to try to deal with stress, like drinking too much, like using medication, self-medicating, cigarette smoking. You throw all that in the hopper, it's absolutely the number one risk factor. Um, and it's invisible though, Joe. It's like we live in stress like fish live in water.
Exactly.
And so it's only really now, I've spent my whole 50-year career trying to help people deal with that, but it slips through your fingers and people don't give it the credit for how powerful it is and how much it affects our lives. So with Mission Possible, we're trying, we've developed a toolbox. Basically, I stuck in the toolbox the seven, I thought, most powerful and most critical skills that I've learned over my 50 plus years in medicine, and that has emerged in the field of mind body medicine. We still don't know enough, and there's more, but you and I want to help people use that toolbox. And so today we talked about addressing the topic of goal setting.
Mhm.
And I would assume, and I'd like you to talk about it, that having a mission or defining a mission is basically goal setting, right? Like, this is my mission. This is what I want to accomplish. This is what I
Right.
have to accomplish. And when I look at the toolbox, the very last mission, is planning and taking action. And you could make a case for maybe we should have put that first. That what is the mission here? This is for our enrollees. What is your personal mission? The very first step of that is to clarify what it is that you want to do. And that would, if people haven't done that, that would be a very useful thing to do, because without a goal, you're drifting. There's a saying, there's no good port of call for a ship there's no good wind for a ship without a port of call.
Absolutely.
Define the mission and where are you going. And in this sense, that would be a good thing for people to really think about.
But think about this, though. I mean, even with our listeners right now, and they can probably agree with me because I just, I'm talking off just my experience as an individual in the military, as well as transitioning and dealing with, life challenges. So we can, sit down and lay on a couch and, and tissues on the side. You can ask me, okay, where's the root of it? Because it stems from the root of it, Marty, is what it is. So if I wake up today, and I get dressed, whatever, and I go to work, all right? So from me getting out of the rack to leaving the house, getting the vehicle to driving to work, or, I'm dealing with challenges throughout the day. I'm dealing with challenges at work. I'm dealing with challenges at the gas station, challenges going back, challenges traveling in business and so forth. There's challenges. So those challenges spark, that anxiety, that the depression, that critical negative attribute that can lead to a bad day, right? So the question is, okay, yeah, the mantra is all life challenges can be managed, but I really think, Marty, that, and they know that, and I know what my rooted issues are. And it stems back to, when I was 4 years old, my father takes my hand, and he puts it over an open flame of a gas stove, right? And he burns the crap out of it, right? And I end up getting plastic surgery and all this on my right hand or whatever. So that's a rooted thing that's always going to stick with me. So that is a negative attribute that is part of my resiliency line. Yeah. And sometimes it surfaces, but it doesn't surface all the time because I try to understand it, through the avenues of marriage and family and study and so forth, but just like me and just like our listeners, there's a root that's always going to be there. So when you weed that mental garden, Marty, I can't get that root out. It keeps on coming back. It's like that old dandelion, it just keeps coming back. So yes, we talk about life challenges for today. How can we manage it? How can we navigate through it? What tools in a toolbox can help me with this day? But I
Right.
think another conversation will be, Marty, is I know these individuals that are listening, they have a rooted issue that contributes to that daily act. It's part of it.
Oh,
There's probably many. So what's your thought on that approach?
well, first of all, I'm very sorry that you experienced that, and what a horrendous thing
It is. It is.
for anybody, 4-year-old or whatever. I'm very sorry to hear that. So but to bring it out from your individual experience to the topic in general, Joe, it's interesting, for the first, you know, before probably the late 1800s, you're kind of talking about the root and get to the root cause, and how do can you cure that? Is it curable? Is that weed pullable? And from the late 1800s, since Freud sort of invented psychotherapy, a type of psychotherapy, it wasn't never formalized before that. The focus was always, going back to the roots in childhood and finding what the traumas were and the issues and the images and the narratives and so on. And that's that can be a very, very useful thing. On the other hand, it started to change in the 70s and 80s. And there was a school of thought. There was a very famous therapist, a guy named Bill Glasser. And I never saw him, but my colleague did, who I taught with for many years. And he went to see him and told him his sad story. And I mean that with respect. And Dr. Glasser said to him, he said, "Look," my friend's name was David. He said, "Look, David," he said, there's nothing either one of us can do about that. But what we can do something about is where you go from here.
Okay.
And therapy started to change from a problems-oriented focus to a solutions-oriented focus, which was, and that doesn't mean that those things aren't important and that there isn't a tree stump in the middle of your field that you might not be able to remove, but you can plow around it. And if you have a purpose for that field, you can plow around it, and you can still, get a good crop out of that field. And so both are important. It's good to mention that you have to acknowledge the difficulty, the pains, the traumas, and we also want to acknowledge that, okay, how do we get from here to where we want to go? And that's, again, where goal setting comes in. So, for instance, you mentioned just the dross of the day, the stress of the day, the crowded gas station or the pump that doesn't work and all that kind of stuff, which can add up. So let's say here that you're a participant in the Mission Possible, you've decided that your mission, the mission you want to take in is you want to be able to slow your mind from 90 to 50. You want to begin thinking in a way that lowers your ambient daily stress level.
Exactly.
So then you start working through the toolbox and you learn abdominal breathing and you learn to back off and have an observer consciousness, and you learn how to relax your body, and you practice for a while because it is a practiced physiologic thing that you want to. So let's say you're carrying that in your head now, I'm going to work and I'm going to pick up the groceries and I'm going to pick up the kid from school and I'm going to do all that stuff. But my secret agenda here, the mission that I'm on personally is I'm going to stay cool through the day.
Exactly.
Maintain it. Okay, so now you got it. So now you're at the gas station, and instead of hauling off and chewing somebody a new rear end or, raising your blood pressure 50 points, it's gonna make it easier to remember, hey, I can breathe. I can breathe. My shoulders are up to here. My muscles are tense. I want to knock somebody's block off. But instead, and this sounds inane in one way, but it's real and it works. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to let my shoulders down. I'm going to let my body relax. I'm going to remember that I'm lucky to be alive and I'm lucky to have a job and I'm lucky to have a family, and
Exactly.
I'm on a mission to be cooler about it, be calmer about it, enjoy it more, being able to, whatever your mission is. It's not my mission, it's your money. Does that make sense?
Oh, no, I think you're spot on with that, Marty. And, personally, I wanted this for DVNF, but I also wanted it for my peers out there, my fellow service members that are veterans, because, while I was in the military, you take your emotional, and who you are, and you actually put it on the back burner, right? So the character is, I always got this thing from individuals. How come I never smile? All my photos, I never smile, never smile. It's just I sadly, not sadly, but in a good way. And I used the term, and I shouldn't do, but I drank the Jim Jones Kool-Aid. I became institutionalized over my years of leadership and all that, because I believed in being a Marine. I believed in the love for our country and all that. Not that I don't now, but I do resent drinking the Jim Jones Kool-Aid to a certain extent. I do, because it affected my family. It affected my well-being, and I wasn't taking care of my well-being. And here I am as that sergeant major, whatever the case is, and I'm dealing with, the Marines and their life challenges, their family, and creating a maintenance plan for an individual that comes in my office. And it was based on them breaking uniform code of military justice, or just in general, are they salvageable? And I was never that individual where I wanted a hammered a young Marine because I fell by wayside because of an alcohol incident or whatever the case is. I wanted to peel the younger back an individual because I knew that individual was salvageable and I would create somewhat of a maintenance plan with their leadership to actually help that individual be a better individual, But I knew deep inside, when I was doing this for that individual, I was actually doing it for myself as well because I was facing those challenges, but I was hiding those challenges as a leader, So now that I'm out of the military, I'm putting my challenges right up front, Marty, because, I don't want to rely on medication. I don't want to rely on the same standard approach to mental health. I feel, and I'm not embarrassed by it. I want to talk about it because I know there's others out there that can relate to me, and maybe I can use some of their suggestions in terms on how they, dealt with life challenges. So, being real and having a conversation, I think, is half the battle. And I think you and I had this conversation yesterday about what more tools can we put in Mission Possible's toolbox. And alcoholism's big, right? So, but here's the thing, though, when we talk about alcoholism, and I was a SAC, I was substance abuse control officer for the military. And like you said, back in the military, you can lead a horse to water and we can make it drink. But in the civilian world, you can lead the horse to water, but you can't make it drink, right? So it's even harder for that individual that understands and they know they have an alcohol problem, and they want help, but they can't because it becomes a disease. So does that individual have to hit rock bottom and lose everything from family to job to everything? And then for them to come to conclusion, I have an alcohol problem, Joe, and I need to get help. I'm going to get help. I'm getting help. What gets that individual, and I know we're not moving off topic, but we are in a way, but from being an alcoholic or having that issue to recognize and be true to themselves, even with opioid addiction, or just being an abrasive individual, how can they just recognize that and take ownership of it and not be embarrassed by it and move forward to take care of business? I think that's a big conversation I had yesterday. I think it's related to Mission Possible as well because it goes back to the root. It goes back to the negative attribute that brings up that, or you fall to wayside because of that. So that's always on my mind as well. So I wanted to get your opinion and thought on that as well. And like you said, we swim in a fish tank of water, and we're going to get bit by a bigger fish.
Yeah. Well, there's a comment in the comment box or the Q&A box, and that's where people can ask their questions or put observations. So there's just one that may have to do with that. She said, Dr. Marty, talking about us swimming in invisible stress is so spot on. I'm happy that I've become much more aware of my own thoughts and emotions, to where when I feel stress, I can sort of say, aha, and point at it, consider it something that's not a part of me, and proceed forward to handle what's causing it, and which is what you're talking about, Joe, and recenter myself. I can see how realizing it, just letting myself go with the flow of the feelings, reacting instead of responding is so easy to do. True, and wreaks havoc in so many people's lives. Thinking of my inner wisdom figure is helpful in these times that I'm more affected by stress and rapid thoughts flood in. So there's the use of several of the tools in the box. And I'll get back to what you said about emotions in a minute. She also says my inner wisdom figure has helped in other ways too. When I'm having trouble finding motivation to get out of bed, do a task, procrastinating, said, I go, wait, what does my actual self want to do? If I'm not doing it, is there a good reason? If not, I just need to give myself 5 seconds and move forward on it. So thanks for that. Because that illustrates the use of being able to step back, observe yourself, connect with your actual self or your inner wisdom, and move from that instead of moving from just floating downstream and not being conscious. What you're saying, Joe, about, we talked about addiction and so on and so forth yesterday, and I think there are a lot of tools in this box that can be useful to people with addiction problems, but only once they've copped to the addiction problem, I think. You can't, people, you can do breathing while you're high, and you can do breathing while you're drunk. and you can do that. It's harder to maintain a cogent line of thinking and self-awareness. I think people get drunk and high in order to be
Suppressing something.
Well, I think that the initial, is to change your state of consciousness. It's to relieve their pain relievers. We've got too much pain to tolerate, so we want to shift our state of mind. And a lot of times when people are high with marijuana, psychedelics, more than with opiate and alcohol, I think we think we see something that we didn't see before, and we might, in an altered state of mind. But a lot of times we don't bring it back and it's not useful. We don't learn and grow from it. It's more of a temporary kind of a thing. And I think most addiction people, you were an addiction counselor and involved with the addiction people. I think the current state of thinking is that generally people do have to hit a bottom. And some people are lucky they hit a high bottom, and they get thrown in the brig, or they get chewed out by a sergeant major who cares for their well-being. They get chewed out, but they get some truth stuck in their face. And they get something like that, and they have a relatively high bottom, and they get into a program or seek help or take on self-help, things like that. So all of these things can be useful. The person that doesn't bottom out till they've been in the hospital multiple times, or they're very sick, or they're committing crimes, or they've been divorced, or they're beating their kids, or burning their kids' hands in a flame. That's tragic, but I don't know. Do you know of anything else does anybody turn around without hitting a bottom, whether it's real or perceived?
You have your occasional drinking, getting with friends and so forth. And
yeah,
and
that's not alcohol. That's not alcoholism.
That's not alcohol abuse, but I guess it can lead to alcohol abuse at some point. And then there's functional alcoholics out there that actually need it because it becomes part of their daily lives, and that poison takes control. I think that happens with opioids as well. But what I found out, in the military, I've actually had service members that were functional alcoholics that you couldn't save, because they're at that point where they have to crash, to realize that they have a serious problem. Then you have the ones that are actually on that line, and they see the value of the mentorship and programs that the military has to offer, and they turn themselves around. But sometimes they don't; they fall by wayside. So, and then I would look at that, and I says, I used to go out in Okinawa, Japan, with a couple buddies, and we'd go drinking beer and enjoying ourselves or whatever. We had this, and I'm not trying to be racial or anything, but certain nationalities, whatever the case is, are prone to alcoholism, whatever. And we had a particular individual that every time we took him out, my God, he was a problem child, and it was, and we're not trying to stipulate what that nationality was, and I'm not going to say what it is, but it was consistent with others that were having the same issues, just like diabetes. Believe it or not, there's certain nationalities that are prone to it than others. It's in the genes or whatever. So maybe being an alcoholic or getting to that point, you have certain genes that are inviting that aspect of a disease, and I don't know, Marty. I don't have the answer on that. I don't know if it's because I know it's a poison. I know anybody can fall to that if they drink enough and they get to that threshold and they fall by wayside. But for someone to be a functional alcoholic and they need that 12-pack every day before they go to work, or they need that hard liquor, they're suppressing something. There's something that they're suppressing, and they used it as an initial suppression, and then it got out of control. So that's just my partake on it.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. I'm not sure, again, coming back to the toolkit, I think they're probably a few steps less likely to use a self-care toolkit because they are habituated or addicted to the toxin.
Well, but Marty, what about imagine I was on USAJobs.com just for giggles yesterday to see
What's
what's
that?
out there in terms of jobs, and they're looking for a mindfulness doctor.
Mhm.
Seriously, for the first time, I was like, oh my God, they're recognizing that we need to start talking about this muscle,
Yeah,
in
right,
our little grape, the functionalities of it, and understanding why where does anxiety come from? Why am I holding on to something I can't control?
right,
How can I cultivate calmness and getting it
right,
before it becomes a problem, right?
right, exactly.
And I think that's amazing. I don't know, it's a job opening position or whatever. I was just wondering. I was like, yeah, I guess it's about time they're recognizing that schoolhouses need to recognize that with our young students. They should have a mindfulness class. They have health classes, teach about
Yeah.
sex and all this. We should talk about mindfulness
And
because
in
that provides
some progressive
respect and understanding of different children, different cultures, different religious backgrounds, and so forth.
yeah,
Just because you're a Roman Catholic or Christian or Baptist or Muslim doesn't mean that you outshine or you're better than the other individuals that have different preferences or whatever the case is. We're all human, right? We all grow up within the community, right? And our families give us that moral value, moral compass, and our outline because that's what they came from. We've
yeah,
gotten away from that. So, and that's a conversation that can be deep with the students and everyone out there is that we're lacking it. So here we are with, that one drop of oil in a beautiful white glass of water, right? And that media, like you and I had that discussion, takes that one drop and they inflate it, right? And it creates the narrative, let it be the West Coast or East Coast or CNN or Fox News, CNBC, MSNBC, and they just create that. So that becomes stressful. But what happens if these individuals, remember I told you about we go to Iraq and they want us to win the heart and minds. We couldn't
right.
win the heart and mind of an adult because that mind is already, saturated with 40 years of dictatorship. But that young child that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 we have an opportunity to win the heart and minds, let them know there's more to dictatorship. There's more to hate, because of a color of a skin or whatever the case is, or religious background. So same thing here. We need to teach our children. It starts with the children, right?
Yeah.
We have
Well,
to start with mindfulness
here's the
at the
problem. Well, you triggered something. What in some sense, what it's all about is the brain is the most powerful human organ. It's the most powerful organ that we have. Nobody's ever taught us how to use our brain. We have a lot of neuroscience now um, that we can learn from in terms of using our brains. And this comes back to the mission. If we could say, whatever the mission may be, we use our brains to figure out how we're going to complete that mission and how we're going to get to the place that we want to get. Nobody ever really teaches us the skills of using the brain, and the brain is the hardware of the mind, because everybody's interested. If you look at the history of humanity, everybody else wants to tell you what to do. So
absolutely.
the churches want to tell you what to do in the synagogue, all the organized religions, they have a program for you. This is how you should behave. This is what you should do. This is blah, blah, blah. A lot of those are good. A lot of those start out moral and kind and loving. They typically end up in crowd control and in managing people. The military certainly, they want you to use your mind to complete the mission. They don't want you to define the mission unless you're the Joint Chief of Staff, right? Um, they're going to define the mission. They give you the mission, Sergeant Major. You give your men the mission. You figure out how you're going to get the mission done. So within that limitation, you're using your brain and your mind.
Mhm.
Our mission with Mission Possible is to teach you how to use the hardware and software in your brain and your mind to to achieve your self-defined mission. What is it now that you want to do? Where do you want to go
Mhm.
from wherever you're starting? And that's basically the toolbox that we've given you. So there's a lot of obstacles to that because everybody else wants your mind. The
Absolutely.
advertisers want your mind. The news channels want your mind.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah,
Politicians
marketers,
want your mind.
everybody wants your.
Everybody wants your attention. The whole world, the whole social media, it's all a contest for your what they call your eyeballs. And what your eyeballs are your attention. Your attention's the most, you could make a case that your attention's the most valuable thing you've got because everybody wants it.
Right.
And they'll
So,
do whatever it takes to get it, and
right,
if you have kids, that they'll do whatever it takes to get it.
right,
And if they can't get your attention by acting nicely, they'll get your attention by acting out and making you pay attention by doing stuff that you don't want them to do. So here we're saying, okay, you're out of the military now. You have the opportunity to define where you want to go if you have the courage and the wherewithal to do that. And here's some ways to use your imagination to maybe expand the range of thoughts you have about where you want to go. Here's how to use your mind and imagination to move yourself towards that. One of the first steps and one of the real challenges, going back to what you said originally, Joe, is that you may need to slow down from that highly vigilant 90-mile-an-hour circling in your head to get down to a speed where you can get a thought in edgewise, in a sense, to your old patterns. And that's where the practice and the work. You've talked a few times about how people go to the gym and they work out and build their muscles in their body. This is about building not exactly muscle, but the equivalent of mental muscle. And there's some training and some practice that go into it. And but that's how you kind of get from here to there. But again, the first step is, if you haven't defined how Mission Possible could help you get to where you want to go, you do want to do that.
yeah, everything's in practice. And Marty, you have a comment right here. I want you to read that one. It's very, it's about what we were just talking about on
Go ahead.
alcoholism and issues. Yeah, so it's pretty interesting.
Go. You want to read that?
I'll let you read it. You articulate a little better than I am. I'm a knuckle dragon sergeant major, so
I'm a good reader, right? I went to college.
exactly.
I used to have a problem with alcohol where I'd drink too much and become a jerk or get myself into trouble. I've been doing so much better in that regard. I'm feeling like I'm finally not as stuck as I used to be, moving forward for once. Good. But life is still hard. It is. And it's not perfect with my crutch of alcohol removed. No, it isn't. And probably it's a matter of philosophy whether it will be. Sometimes it seems like the good choices I made don't even matter, which sometimes leads me to feeling like slipping back into old ways, or at least not putting effort into avoiding it. Any ideas on how to stay positive when there's not much of a support system and hard to see the light at the end of the road? That's a very good question. Thank you for sharing.
Powerful question. It's a
Very
powerful.
powerful. What's your response to that, Joe?
Well, I don't know this individual, but
Right.
like,
He's not alone. Let's put it
no,
that way.
you're definitely not alone. Trust me, you're normal. You are quite normal. Trust me. So I'll definitely tell you that. But my thought on this topic is very simple. Like, for instance, so if I'm using, and you made mention, the individual that emailed, said that it's an old crutch, but he doesn't use it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So now he's wondering, what crutch can I use? Because I don't want to fall back on that crutch, but life challenges and my daily nonsense in the world is bothering the hell out of me, and I don't want to fall back on that crutch.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me tell you what I do. I paint. I listen to jazz music. I love jazz music. I learned to love jazz music, and I'm looking for alternate platforms I can just test out and so forth to take my mind off of those things that would make me fall to what I used to do. That'd be drinking alcohol, smoking marijuana, taking pills or anxiety medicine or whatever. I always look for those alternatives. And if you're alone, it's harder. But if you have a family, maybe do more with the family, more quality time. or just volunteer at a church, volunteer at a soup kitchen, just volunteer within your community. But here's the thing too: if you have friends that are still drinking alcohol, it's even harder for you to move forward from that because it's in your face all the time. So you may have to change your style of life. You may have to change the characteristics of you hang out with. Misery loves company. One of those things.
I think that's
I would say, find out what your passion is. What did you want to be? What about fishing? What about this? I mean, look at what other alternative means are out there. It's so easy to sit at a pub, and drink those IPA beers, and that bartender becomes your counselor. And they're doing shots with you, whatever the case is, or your buddies. If your daily activity, let it be lunch or dinner, is based on alcohol as your beverage of choice, or eating a meal, you got a problem.
Yeah.
And that needs to be addressed. If you can't sit down and have lunch or dinner and order a Diet Coke or Coca-Cola or water, you have to have that IPA beer or whatever, and it's consistent, then that's an issue. That's a crutch that can become a problem. I think you recognize that, and shout out to your brother, man. I think that's awesome, and you're being honest and true. And brother, I don't have an answer for you, but you're not alone. And then maybe you can, look at that toolbox and just, aspirin yourself, cultivate that calmness. What's bothering you out there? I'd love to hear more from you on some of the things that you're trying that failed, or just talk about some of your hobbies. Do you like writing? Stay off social media. It's poison. That's just my mind, I don't need,
also
I
don't
don't need
forget,
digital friends.
a lot of people drink because they're depressed, and it's a
Exactly.
self-medication, and it sounds like this guy is really doing good. He's made definite progress, but life is still hard. And when you're depressed, which is a psychobiological condition, it's even harder, and it's harder to mount that hope and positive feelings and intentions. So you mentioned a couple of things, and we don't know if this fellow has made use of these things. You mentioned finding things that you enjoy, finding things that are non-toxic, that eat up some of that time and bring you pleasure during that time. But even those are difficult if you're depressed. I think probably the key thing that you mentioned that resonates with me, Joe, and is really important, as you always do, because you're a great people person, is people. And it's, do you have new friends? You may not have new friends, and it's, where would you get that? I think that's part of the power of groups like 12-step groups and AA, and there's other forms of 12-step like groups that are not that don't have an 11th step and a religious step in it. A lot of people have difficulty with that with AA, but there are non-secular groups of AA, and that one of the most powerful things of those groups is a fellowship. And there are lots of people there who in their own way have dealt with this, and some of them much more severely than you, and some of them not as severely. And to be with people and see how they've met those challenges and is a big part of it, but also just being with people who reinforce each other's commitment to not drinking, because that's their number one step. And having people get what do they call it? It's not a mentor, but if you're there for a while, you get you connect with a person who's kind of your support person. He's your
Sponsor.
Sponsor. Thank you. I was blocking on that as so it's that human connection as well as a group. It's a family that you weren't born with, but that has a common goal, and that is genuinely devoted to supporting you. That's very useful. Therapists can be useful. Some are and some aren't. Some people.
I think therapists are very useful, Marty. And here's the thing, though: you don't have to be a therapist to have conversation. Friends somehow are better to communicate than with family, because family can be critical.
Friends. Yeah.
Family, and friends, if they're good friends, they won't judge you. And my personality is, I'm kind of gregarious. Means I'm a social butterfly in a way.
Right.
Not to put myself on on a
Yeah, you would
pedestal
make
would be a
friends
large
easily.
part. I just happen to like people. I just love people. I don't care if you're fat, skinny, tall or short, what your ethnic background, religion. I just love people. I the best part about my military services was having a different variety of Marines. I just loved it. I loved the guy that was from West Virginia with his accent. It tickled me.
Mhm.
I loved the city guy that was, I just loved the culture of being in the military. I did because I learned so much and I was excited about it. If I had a bunch of Irish individuals in one company, it wouldn't be fun.
Yeah,
We'll be eating the same, same food or whatever the case is. But I just enjoyed that. I think I learned a lot in
yeah,
the military in terms of that. So if I'm out and about, I talk to everybody. I don't care who it is. I don't care what they're wearing or whatever. I just enjoy
right.
people. And I learn every time I communicate with somebody, I relate to them. So
Exactly.
maybe trying to be a little bit more gregarious and just break out of that shell. Sometimes it's hard for individuals. But go back, right,
People
but
have,
going back to goal setting, Marty, this could be, for this individual, this could be a goal
yeah,
for this individual in terms of
exactly.
yeah, exactly. Okay, I'm going to set a goal where I'm going to try something different,
Yeah.
or start a new hobby, go to pottery, or
Well, it's got to be
supplements,
something that energizes you.
supplement a short-term goal, right? And see if that works. It'll keep your mind off falling back to, drinking possibly, and you may start something new. And if that fails, try something else.
Yeah, it's easier to say than to do, as you know, especially if there is an element of depression because you don't have enough of the neurochemicals. So we're giving people skills rather than pills, but I do want to reiterate also that I don't see anything wrong with medications when they're needed. It's just that in medicine, the way it's constructed and the way our so-called healthcare system, because it's not a system, is constructed, it tends to go there first because it's cheap and easy, as opposed to therapy, which can be more expensive and takes work, and even with self-care things. So I think we've hit a lot of things to make sure that this person has adequate support and addresses what's probably an underlying depression, which can sap the hope and the energy and the willingness to move forward. But what you said is true, Joe, that I wonder if there's a mission that he can clarify, that he can state that would support him during the downs, the ups and the downs where there was a mission statement you can go back to.
Mhm.
Because certainly if you look at,
All life challenges can be managed. It starts right there, brother. One big soundbite, and it can be managed. And
yeah,
you got to get that mental agility, get the strength
yeah,
of believing in yourself and believing that challenge can be. But also for this individual, something's bothering them. I
right.
mean, if that
Just to
crutch
make
was
sure
there
he's got a
for
place to talk about that in a group. And again, that can be anything from a 12-step group to a psychotherapy group. And there's a lot of resources available that way, to an individual therapy, to certainly to friends if he's got them that don't live his old lifestyle, because that's a very powerful. I worked in addictions for quite a while, and I worked in a heroin addiction treatment unit, a locked ward in Chicago, on the south side of Chicago back in the early 70s. And we would get these heroin addicts in and clean them up. And 3 weeks, they'd be totally clean, have no withdrawal symptoms, be totally clean of the drug, go back up on their street corners and go into full man with the golden arm, cold turkey, just from the psychological. So those are good. So support, group support, self-care support, clarify a mission that would cover the downs. Um,
I
make
agree
sure
with it. Yeah.
be evaluated for depression. And I'm not saying medication is the first kick, but there's nothing wrong with medication either,
Exactly.
because it changes your perspective sometimes and gives you a chance to use the tools in the toolbox when you're constantly pulling yourself up and getting your head above water. Sometimes there's no energy left to use the tools.
Mhm.
Hey, Joe, can we read this last comment, and
Sure.
that'll take us out, because it's It's a good one. I had a rather chaotic childhood, struggled with depression and anxiety since early on, and for many years never really had goals, as I kind of assumed I would not be around long. So looking forward would be pointless or a waste of energy. In the past few years, I've had quite a dramatic turnaround. I've reached a point where I was able to see the depression and anxiety as unwanted filters that were added to my perception rather than a part of myself. So that's that observing self again that came in. I left a 7-year toxic relationship. Good for you. Moved to a place I love, started meditating regularly, doing regular sensory deprivation floats, joined Mission Possible, and now have actual goals to buy a plot of land and build on it and then get my own float tank. I thank you for making the course available to us, and I thank myself for putting the work in, even when things seem grim. So thank you. It's inspirational. I mean, this is what Joe means when he says all challenges can be managed, and some can be managed and coped with, some can be overcome.
Mhm.
So you can change course, and these people are good examples of that. What do you think of that one, Joe?
I think you're absolutely right. And sometimes, life challenges is like taking an axe to a rubber tree, and you're sitting there trying to chop down that rubber tree, my God, and it's just like I can't get through it. And eventually you get through it. So you just have to keep on moving, keep on getting on, one of those things,
Yeah.
and stay positive. I believe that all life challenges can be managed. I don't think that things can't be cured. We're not at that level yet. Medication can kind of like suppress a little bit, and but I think the problem's always going to be there. But understanding how we think, understand the makeup of who we are, understanding what we were bred from. You can't choose your parents, right? You can't choose how you were born into this life, and maybe the rest of society got a hold of you, and you're trying to break away from that. So there's so many things out there that life goes through. One individual life being born goes through, right? And it's normal, right? And then you hear this phrase out there, Marty, when a child's born, and they're born into a family that has money and wealth and so forth, they call it a privileged child, right? A privileged individual. I don't believe in that. I believe that, yeah, they are privileged, but it's from hard work of those parents or whatever the case is. But that doesn't necessarily mean that privileged individual that, their college is being paid for, education being paid for, they're getting those things all through life is a bad individual. But I wasn't privileged growing up, but that doesn't make me a bad individual as well. I had to bring myself to a certain level in life. So these individuals, you need to bring yourself to a point in your life where you're happy, by understanding this, understanding, why do I hold on to things? How can I get through this day? Do I need alcohol to lean on? Do I need, other avenues to lean on? So just think about Mission Possible. Think about creating that calmness for yourself. I think these tools are wonderful. I think you need to do it privately. I think you need to take that time, just like when you go to the gym. There's a question in here. It's, what do we think about Elon Musk? Um, I'm a fan of innovativeness and strategies, and I think that individual brings a lot. But this one said that what are you guys' thoughts on Elon Musk recently proudly saying uh, his tombstone will say never had therapy? Why do you think therapy gets so much bad name sometimes? I think that's all changing. Number one, and number
Yeah.
one, don't let Elon fool you. He's
Yeah.
brilliant. I love
Yeah.
I love brilliance and all that, but him texting that or writing that on his social media, whatever, that's his therapy. Don't let him fool you because he wants that respawn back because that keeps him in the lateral limits. He's a smart guy. Don't let that text fool you. All right. He needs therapy. And believe it or not, people like me reading it and making a comment, that's therapy for him. So that's my thought on that, So, but I don't think therapy did get the bad rap, but I think that's changing, but it depends on the platform of therapy, right? Right.
It depends on the
Platform.
platform, it depends on the person, it depends what use you make of it. Most therapists are well-intentioned people you want to make sure they have good training and experience, and you want to trust your gut in terms of what they now. There's therapists that work for organizations who may have two masters.
Mhm.
So, you know, if you see a therapist whose goal is to work with you and help you develop into the best and most fulfilled person that you can be, that's wonderful. I think people, I don't know what therapy's like in the military, but it's kind of like medicine in the military. You know, medicine in the military in wartime, your purpose is to get the injured individual back into the battle. And so you're doing, you know, you're patching them up and getting them back in. Who are you serving in that? That's a whole other kind of discussion. But you know, and there are, like in any profession, in any place, there are better therapists and worse therapists. But when I was growing up, and even in, like I said, mental health is still the stepchild of health. It should be the primary.
Exactly.
It should be the primary aim of health is how do we bring up children who are really educated and understand, are emotionally literate, understand where their emotions come from, have outlets in case they grow up in an abusive family, you know, in a utopian world. All of that would be out and there would be places for those kids to go and so on, but we don't live in that utopian world.
And it is right. Absolutely.
I want to
Absolutely.
get off
Because
yeah, I want to get off.
Marty, that's a heck of a conversation to go that I can definitely enjoy with you as well, because
Oh,
it's just like being a leader, right? You get a leader up out in front of the group, right?
right.
And what are they doing? They're leading, right? They're mentoring, they're leading by example, they're creating the narrative so they can follow, right? That's how the military is, right? Follow, right? Our country, right? We have a mission statement of our country, right? Based off Constitution, right? And religion, right, provides that moral compass, right? And then you get that false prophet, you want to call it that or whatever,
Yeah.
and they take that dialogue and what do? They stretch it, exercise it, right? And they bend it, right? Because guess what? That audience, right, believes in a good moral compass that gives them left and right lateral limits of life to be true, to be honest, to be good, right? To be part of a community. But sometimes you get that individual that flexes, right? Or expands upon literature, right? To sell and so forth. But yes, it goes deep. It really does.
They utilize it for power and control. So
absolutely.
That's another conversation, and I hope I didn't offend anyone and didn't mean to pick on one or the other, but
I'm right there with you.
Throughout all human organizations. They often start out with a good mission, and power corrupts, as we say, but we got 10 o'clock now, Joe. It's been a good conversation.
Well, you know what, I believe, Marty, that all life challenges can be managed. And I believe that you and I need to continue the conversation. And I really enjoy my time, not only with you, but, reflecting on the questions and talking about the toolbox.
Yeah.
And I'm excited about next month. I can't wait to have this opportunity with you again, Marty.
Who knows what'll happen then?
Yeah, you never know. But Marty, I didn't have the opportunity to ruffle your feathers, but I know social media.
Did I ruffle yours at all, Joe?
Pardon me?
Did I ruffle yours at all? I'm going to ruffle yours.
Well, you don't ruffle me. You try to slow me down a little bit. So, but then again, we are like-minded in many ways. But next time,
it's a pleasure to work with you, Joe.
Always.
Listen, 10 o'clock after 10, we should go. Okay. And but for our listeners, and thank you for participating. There are a lot of good shares today. Go to mission 7, the planning and taking action. Go to the first step, which is just clarify. And if you haven't done this, clarify for yourself what it is you want to accomplish with Mission Possible. Write yourself a mission statement and then go back and take a look at the other tools and see how they can help you get to where you want to go. All right. And we'll see you next month. Joe and I will be talking. And
definitely. Marty, I'm going to get you next time. We're going to talk about what pushes your buttons. I'm going to get you to go to 90. I want to see what I can do with you.
Well, I think I'll skip that session, Joe. Thanks for the warning. Bye-bye.
Absolutely. You take care of yourself. All life challenges can be managed.